So I remember being back in college. I was a freshman at the University of Oregon, and I decided, hey, I want to follow God. And so I asked a campus ministry leader, like, how do I pursue Jesus? How do I run after God? They're like, well, you do music, so why don't we have you lead worship at our worship gathering weekly? I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I got involved, and it was fun, it was good, but I still found myself kind of feeling empty inside. So I was like, well, what's next? What do I do next? And he was like, are you studying the Bible? We have this Bible study. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Like, I need to grow and understand the Bible. And so I went to this Bible study, and I was hungry for God's word. And there was some really great conversation and discussion that happened. But at the end of the day, I still kind of felt this growing emptiness inside. All right, well, what next? And they're like, well, are you praying? So I found the 6 a.m. prayer gathering on Wednesday mornings, and I'm like, dude, 6 a.m., that sounds like Navy SEAL, commando, gung-ho. I'm gonna go gung-ho for Jesus. So I get up at 6 a.m. while my roommates are still sleeping and sneaking out, and I get involved praying, but I actually still end up feeling even more empty. So I'm like, dude, what's up? What do I do next? This guy was like, hey, have you tried sharing your faith? I'm like, well, feels a little awkward, but okay, I'll give it a shot. And so he gave me this stack of tracts and went down. I started these conversations with folks like, hey, what do you think about God? But there was this twist where it's like the more stuff I was doing, the more this void inside me seemed to grow. I found this kind of catch-22 where on the one hand, I felt this emptiness inside that was growing, but on the other hand, I had people going, dude, look at Josh, he's on fire for Jesus, he's really rocking it. And I felt like, man, I don't want to let folks down. And so I kind of would keep this mask on and this kind of religious facade of acting like I had it all figured out, while inside, God felt really distant. Well, finally, I said, I know what'll fix it. I'll go on a mission trip. This is like the hardcore serving Jesus, all out for Jesus. So I went to Japan that summer. And in many ways, it was a really amazing experience. Like, I met these phenomenal Japanese believers that were just doing awesome stuff. And there was a sense, though, that they were able to just rest in God's love for them. And it's not like they were just sitting around. There was stuff going on, but it wasn't characterized by kind of that striving that I felt in my own life. I found it beautiful. I didn't know what to do with it or where to put it. So I came back from Japan, and I remember getting this landscaping job. And this was kind of the point of the story here, the landing pad, where I have these 3 days, and I'm supposed to dig out all these trees and roots and shrubs. So for 3 days, like, I'm digging up these roots and trees and all this stuff. And simultaneously, I think it was symbolic in retrospect, because I'm digging up these roots and all this in my soul, and just, God, what do I believe? What do I think about you? And after the 3 days, I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I'm tired, I'm dusted, and I'm just surrounded by this dirt and death. And I just said, God, F you, God, like, F it. If this is who you are, I want nothing to do with you. And I pretty much gave God the finger, turned my back on him. And I don't know if it was a minute later or hours later, but I just remember being surrounded in that backyard by the presence of Christ. What I heard him say was, Josh, you've had this whole thing backwards. Like, you thought this was about you coming out to find me, and the entire time, I've been the one coming out to find you. And so I just started dancing in that backyard all dirty. I remember my ride came to pick me up and was just like, what are you so happy about? And I was like, it's grace, it's grace. And I just beaming ear to ear, and they're like, all right, I don't know what you're talking about. That's great. It's grace. And I go back to school, and I found the season where I had to pull out of a lot of the activities I was involved in to just rest in the goodness of God. And people were like, oh no, Josh, you're falling away. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm falling in. Like, I've fallen into the love of God. You know, just go to church and sit under the proclamation of the word and receive the sacraments and let the life of Christ begin to take root in me. And there were these nights I can remember, just tears of joy of just being overwhelmed by how good God is. I remember these verses that I've been reading started coming to life. Verses like in Ephesians where Paul says, it's by grace through faith that you've been saved, and this is not of yourselves. And I realized I had it backwards. I thought it was by faith through grace. I come and I bring God my faith, and that like creates this channel where he's like, okay, now I'll give you grace. I realized, no, that's backwards. It starts with the God who is grace. His very presence is gracious. His goodness is for us. And faith is simply taking our eyes off of ourselves and looking to God and receiving the goodness that's there waiting to embrace us. You know, I had this image that I would use to try and explain to people at the time, that it felt like I had been climbing this rope called Christianity to try and get to God. And eventually I got tired and worn out, and I let go, thinking that I was falling into nothing, but found that I'd actually fallen into Christ. And I found, I think true Christianity is less about the climbing and more about the falling into Jesus. That it's less about the finding and more about the being found, by the pursuing God who comes relentlessly after us. My hope in writing this book is that we could encounter the grace of God afresh and anew, and that it would give us the strength to dance hard in this dirty world filled with dust and death, and that we could actually take joy and laugh even in the face of all that we've lost, because we've encountered grace, the grace who comes with arms wide open to embrace us and make all things new.
The Pursuing God by Joshua Ryan Butler. A reckless, irrational, obsessed love that's dying to bring us home. Available now.